right, welcome back, everyone. I'm Meredith Banka, your co-host of Faith Infused Leadership, and I'm so excited to be here today with our host, Debbie Heiser, who is also the founder of Three Vines Consulting. How are you doing today, Debbie?
I'm great, Meredith. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, just absolutely fantastic. And I'm thrilled for our topic today because you wanted to talk about leadership from some pretty amazing angles. So what did you want to dive into today?
Meredith, I want to kind of dig into this thought that as a leader, it's really important that we lead from three spaces, and that would be our head, our heart, and then our soul. And I use a three-legged stool as a metaphor for a lot of different things, for decision making, a lot of different things. And so in this case, it's very similar. It's a three-legged stool. And what I look at that three-legged stool as is that one leg is our spirit, one leg is our heart, and one leg is our mind. And as we're going about leading, if one of those legs is shorter or taller than the other by a significant amount, it's going to be uneven and lopsided. And in some cases, the chair won't stand up. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important. And I don't want to give this false pretense that all three are always in balance, but we need to make sure we're touching on all three of those angles as we're leading people, or we're not going to be the best leader we could be.
Absolutely. So I'm really interested in talking about this aspect of leading with the soul. So tell me a little bit more about what you mean when you say you've got heart, you've got mind, you've got soul. What's the difference between soul and heart?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there was a whole lot there that you just asked, so I'm going to try to break this down. So to me, the biggest difference when I think about leading from my soul, there's a few things that need to happen. And I talked about this on a previous video cast, in the fact that you have to understand your why. Why am I in leadership? And I have a great ebook out on my website that you can download to help you through that process. But why is it that I want to lead? And what's my intention around leadership? And so when you understand that, that starts the core values for yourself. So then you have to think about, what do I stand for as a leader? And I will tell you, when I started, I had about 12 different things that I said, this is what I stand for. And these are like the rock of my foundation for what I lead with. And ultimately, there's characteristics like honesty and integrity and all of those that I have as values, but really a big value orientation is hire the right person for the right job. Everything else we can deal with, right? But that's one thing that I stick with all the time. So it's understanding kind of those sticky points, and then it's understanding what are those characteristics or values that you expect of other people and that you expect of yourself. When you have that lays a foundation then for you to feel confident in yourself and what you stand for. And all through that, there's this, I'm making the assumption, but it's an assumed spiritual guidance in this. A lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, a lot of actually reading scripture to figure out, like, what is it that I want to stand for as a leader? Do I want to serve other people? Honesty and integrity are two big ones for me. And I have a list of values that when I have new people, I go through that list and say, this is what you can expect from me, and here's what I need to expect from you. And so it's all encompassed in kind of that, almost like a mission statement for yourself as a leader. And then what are your value statements?
So how did you come to I'm sure you didn't have that the first time you were a manager, right? You didn't have this like nearly balanced three-legged stool of heart, mind, and soul when you showed for your first management position. So how did you come to understand that all three of those components are critical to success as a leader?
Yeah, Meredith, there's so many different examples of where I wasn't in balance, but we seek for that, right? As far as having those things there. And I would say I've learned it along the way, even so much as I was just having a conversation with a mentor the other day around a leader and something that happened within their leadership team that really felt like a betrayal to this person, and how quickly they jumped up into the mindset so that they didn't have to feel it. And therefore, when you do that and you're leading other people, it gives people a message that it's not good to have feelings around it. You have to stay up here. And so your model of how you handle some of that gives messages to other people about how they can handle themselves in those situations. So I would say even up into the other day when I was having that conversation, I was learning more about that as well. I would say early on, though, in my career, working for Sprint Publishing, that was a very servant-led organization, even though they may not have said it was a servant-led organization. And so really understanding that it was important to make good business decisions. So here comes another three-legged stool. It was important to make good business decisions based on what the business needed, what the employees needed, and then also what our clients needed. And those three things had to balance out also. And that really taught me a lot then too about leading people, that you really had to look at multiple angles and really come at it from different perspectives and not just logic, but also how it would impact people, what those feelings would be. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's where I would say was first introduced to it.
Sure, it does make sense. And it's also helping me to understand that the art of this must also be in recognizing when you're out of balance or getting out of balance between these two or three areas, and understanding how to pull the balance back in. So maybe you can share with us, like if you do see a manager or yourself going into this kind of mind heavy approach, what are the tips and tricks that you can offer to pull them back into this balance?
Yeah, Meredith, and it's really hard because some people that have worked with me before, when I say this, will laugh because I say this a lot, but it depends. It really depends on the situation, on what I would do. But there have been times that I've felt the imbalance, and before I go into a meeting with someone, I would say a quick little prayer and say, let the words be from you. Let me handle myself the way I'm supposed to here. Because when you go into a business situation, it is hard, depending on the culture of the company, to show some of those feelings and to be able to discuss them sometimes as adults. Sometimes they can be pretty charged. It's not all, crying. It's anger. It's feelings of frustration. It's feelings of excitement or joy. Things went well, celebrations for celebrating the end of certain things. So I would say the biggest tip would be to recognize when you're in those situations that there are emotion to it, and to acknowledge it. Because when you don't acknowledge the emotion, it becomes a lot of times bigger than what it needed to be, kind of making a mountain out of a molehill type of saying, where when people don't feel seen or heard or understood, and that's where that component comes in the most, I think, is in the heart space, then it creates additional issues. I don't know if that really answered your question, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're just really encouraging everyone to think about management not from this textbook, kind of approach, if you will, right? And this is such a sea change in the way that I think many of us have come up through management or even been treated as employees, is that you're just there to get the work done. And really what I hear you saying is I think I just heard you say that you can have emotion at work.
Yeah, which
right?
might frighten some people. Yeah. And Meredith, a couple of examples just came to my head as far as applicable ones. So I think about whenever I would go to do end of the year evaluations.
Everyone's favorite.
Exactly. And, instead of me coming back out and saying, here's the things that you did really well, here's the things that you didn't do so well, before I even start to go into what I say, I ask people, I want you to list out 3 things that if you could do this last year all over again, what would you do differently? What do you think are some things that you struggled with? And have them talk about it, and then ask them, what are 3 things that you think you did really, really well? And 9 times out of 10, they just went through the annual evaluation that I wrote. And so, but that allowed for them to know that it was okay for them to talk about these things. And I made a safe environment for them to talk about these things that they felt like were potentially areas that they needed to have some development on, or just had an epic fail, and it was okay to admit to that. That's part of that heart space, I think, too, in the spirit space. Instead of just coming in and talking through the evaluation, that would be one of the big things. The other thing I see happen a lot, and this is in corporate, this is in small businesses. Whenever somebody is displaying a behavior that you need to counsel. Now, to me, there's a difference between coaching people and counseling people. And this would be some behavior that's consistently going on, that's not necessarily great behavior, and you would like to see it change. And I'll give an example. I had a woman one time that I worked with, and I think I've talked about her in a past video cast as well, that she was always late, and she relicensed her car like twice. That's what she told me within, a given couple of weeks. And she always had an excuse as to why she was late. And I see a lot of managers in that situation sit down with someone and say, here's the deal. You've been late, blah, 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 blah. And we're going to put a written warning in here. This behavior needs to change, blah, go back to work. I mean, that's typically the process that people use. Instead of sitting down with the person and saying, hey, what's going on? Like, assuming that people want to come to work to do a good job. So what's happening? What's going on with you? Then you find out the real story behind why the behavior's not changed. And then you can change that behavior. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the chances of success are not real high. So to me, that's logic. But I'm asking things to get people to open up from their heart and spirit space to tell me what's going on in their life so that we can hopefully change some things to make it better for them.
For sure. And that old school approach of almost, punitive treatment, it's really one dimensional. And I think what you're right, the head dimension. And I think what you're encouraging, and where managers need your help in order to be savvy, is that it's easy to have a work brain and a not work brain, right? It's not easy, or in my view, even possible to have a work soul and like the rest of my life soul, or like a work heart and then like the rest of my life heart. Like that's who I am.
Right.
And as much as we can create separate spaces logically in our brain for the work to-do list and the home to-do list, I think you're tapping into this idea that we actually are holistic, and as managers, we need to be able to manage our people that way.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, so there's a really good book too called The Congruent Life. And that's kind of what it talks to is, you'll have tension points, but you have to be in congruency in those avenues. And interestingly enough, whenever I work with people, I always say to them, I'm not going to ever tell you to leave your home life at home. Mm-hmm. Because you hear that so many times. When you get to work, you leave everything else. I mean, I've had people say it to me. And to me, that is so out of congruency, because it's not, to your point, we are holistic people. And if something's going on at home, or something's going on with a family member, or somebody's sick, that is going to impact my work. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that I'm doing it on purpose. And it doesn't mean that I am not giving 120% when I'm there and something's not going on. So it goes back to that whole work-life balance, or is it really satisfaction kind of thing? Mm-hmm. But I think the same thing holds true as leaders. We can't just assume that people leave certain things, because then that pops you right up here, and it's only one dimensional, as you mentioned. So,
mm-hmm. And I think we've been brought up in a way that, even though we have seen management shift in the direction that you're suggesting, certainly in my career, I've certainly seen that shift. There's still almost an embedded assumption in the way that we're bringing people into the workforce that work and home are separate, that they're going to be able to achieve that balance, and that your boss is only going to care about what you get done there. And I mean, I've got to say, I think that's directly related to the amount of work or career dissatisfaction we're seeing right now. I mean, isn't it something like 80% of people say that they hate their job?
Yeah, that's a pretty strong statement. Yeah.
That's awful. That's awful.
Yeah, it is awful. And here's part of what I see happen is that when we have tension because we're not looking at things in a holistic way either, what happens is we start, and I've seen this with small business owners, I see it with corporations, but their bank account is Wall Street. Where they start making decisions based on the dollars versus looking at it holistically. and involving their teams in helping to problem solve. Hey guys, we got this problem. We're down, 20% in revenue. Does anybody have any idea why? Oh yeah, there's a competitor that moved in down the street, or, so-and-so's delivering X, Y, and Z, and using them as a resource and tapping into your employees to help figure out and solve the problem. People come to work too to be a part of something bigger. And until we can recognize that and look at them as part of the team, it doesn't mean that you don't have the veto rights. And it doesn't mean that there are times that you need to be more directional and less collaborative, but using them to help. I always use the example. So when I worked at Citibank, we had trainers and we had classes over the Christmas holidays sometimes. And they were off, on like Christmas Day and New Year's Day, but someone had to be there to train the rest of the time. And we like to be off on the holidays. And so there was a problem because I don't do things by tenure. I don't see the value in saying, oh, you get this many days at the holidays, because that person's going to always get them because they've been around the longest. So I pulled the team together and I said, you know what, let's look at this holistically. And everybody has some emotion around this because everybody wants to be off. People have family in town, but let's figure this out together. And interestingly enough, I stepped back, the two managers that managed the trainers stepped back, and these trainers started to talk about it and figured it out, where everyone got a day or two off and they rotated to come into the class. And sometimes it was just that we had to have our presence there during the time, and we may not have had a class, but they figured it out, and then everybody was happy with it. And they even went so far as to say, okay, this year I'll take a week, and then next year, and they ended up partnering with people to say, okay, then next year you're going to take the week and I get the week off. And so it was just a phenomenal thing to watch happen. And I think so many business owners are so afraid to allow that holistic approach to problem solving that they don't go into it, which goes back to what I said before, where when you have your values and kind of what you stand for, and I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not magic. The P&L is not going to look beautiful if you're not doing hard work around it too, but it's around looking at creative ways to solve those problems that you have. So, and to me, that's more holistic than just saying, I'm going to figure this out by myself as the leader.
Yeah. And ego must play a role in that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And realizing that, if you have an employee that is answering phones, they're super important. I'll give you an example. We were doing a meet and greet at the local hospital the other day, and someone said, oh, I'm just the janitor. And we're like, are you crazy? Like, it's a hospital. It's so important that a hospital is clean. Your job is like extremely important and extremely valuable. And so it's also about helping our employees see the holistic picture of what their job is. That person didn't just clean floors. Right. They kept people healthy. And that's that part of something bigger. And until we can get into our mind and our heart and our soul space, a lot of times we have blinders on and we can't really see that bigger picture either. And so then it's harder for us. Well, we can't share it with the people that work with us if we don't see it ourselves. But we can't assume either that the people that are following us understand or see what the bigger picture is either. You have to constantly communicate it.
Wow. That's huge right there, because, the story with the janitor, again, he's even coming to work with this mindset that he doesn't matter. Right. And so just even being able to shift that for him creates this openness and this opportunity for improvement, this opportunity for collaboration. I can see how that just begins to really shift so much in the workplace by asking those right heart-centered and soul-centered questions of people.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So if people wanted to find out a little bit more about this work and how it is that you can help organizations, individuals, even solopreneurs in this space, where would you have them go?
Yeah, I would go out to my website at www.3V as in Victor, consulting.com. And I have a couple of ways. You can actually, I have a blog on my website that I have more information about this holistic mind, heart, and spirit leadership, as well as this theory around people wanting to do something bigger, like being part of a bigger picture that you can read more about. And then I also highly recommend, if you struggle in this arena or just want some help, I do have a call to action button out there that you can just push on to set up a 30-minute free consultation that we can talk a little bit more about it and put you on the right path. That I'd love to have a conversation with more people around it. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Faith Infused Leadership. I'm your co-host, Meredith Benka, with your host, Debbie Heiser, signing off, and we'll see you all the next time.
Thanks, everybody.